That crawling electric sensation that strikes the moment you try to rest, well, that's restless leg syndrome. And I've got a story about how it nearly cost me my life. This condition is one of the most maddening things that I have ever personally dealt with. And if you clicked on this video, then I'm assuming that you're in the throes of it as well. My breaking point with RLS came one afternoon while I was driving home from work. I was so incredibly sleep deprived after dealing with this for 2 years that I fell asleep behind the wheel and to hit a tree at 30 miles an hour. I am very lucky because I walked away with a fractured collarbone, severely bruised ribs, a couple of abrasions, and a pretty severe concussion as well, but that was it. So coming up, I'm sharing how I was able to finally get a handle on this and eventually eliminate it completely, because while I can't change my tree encounter, I can hopefully prevent you from having your own due to restless leg syndrome. All right, so what exactly is restless leg syndrome and what do researchers believe causes it? This restless reality is also known as Willis-Ekbom disease, and it creates this overwhelming urge to move your legs, typically accompanied by uncomfortable sensations that people describe as crawling, tingling, pulsing, itching. Like I said, it's maddening. So here's what makes it particularly challenging. Symptoms primarily appear during periods of rest or inactivity and tend to worsen at night. But the temporary relief that comes with movement creates this frustrating cycle that just decimates sleep patterns. I was literally doing bicycle kicks in bed, and then I'd give up and pace around my house until the sun came up. And if you share a bed with someone, fully prepare to be couch surfing until you get a handle on it, unless you're actively looking for the perfect way out of that relationship. Then, by all means, snuggle in close, because it is horrible for you and for them. It's like your legs have somewhere to be, but the rest of your body just didn't get the memo. Business on top, raging frat party on the bottom. So what causes it? Well, researchers believe it's a mix of genetics, brain chemistry, and lifestyle factors. And we're starting off with neurological dysfunction. The primary and most compelling explanation for this condition centers around dopamine dysfunction, which is the neurotransmitter that helps control muscle movements. And when its pathways don't function properly, then RLS symptoms can emerge. The predominant theory here centers on dysregulation, particularly within the basal ganglia, or this area here, which controls voluntary movement initiation and coordination. So here's what research has revealed. On PET scans and SPECT scans, reduced dopamine receptor binding in the basal ganglia is seen, suggesting either receptor downregulation or increased competition for endogenous dopamine. Translation: dopamine receptors either act like toddlers refusing to listen, downregulation, or victims of a mean girl cafeteria takeover where natural dopamine hogs all of the attention, competition. Either way, your legs are acting like they just slammed an espresso.
Whatever. Those rules aren't real.
Magnetic resonance scans have also identified metabolic changes in dopamine-rich brain regions, which means that the way energy is processed and used is just off in general. And this could be from the low dopamine levels or a parallel issue happening alongside these dopamine abnormalities. So think of it like this. Imagine your brain cells are tiny factories. Normally, they take in fuel, which is glucose, and efficiently convert it to energy to power all of their activity. In these dopamine-rich regions, however, these factories aren't processing it correctly. They might be wasting fuel, not producing enough energy, or using the wrong fuel sources altogether. And this could contribute to symptoms linked with dopamine irregularities like we see in Parkinson's, ADHD, or potentially RLS. And all of this doesn't mean that there's necessarily a dopamine shortage. That's only one possibility. It can be a case of overcompensation as well. Too much dopamine firing during the day causes your receptors to become desensitized to it. And by the time night rolls around, your brain's like,
yeah, I'm fresh out of that.
Leaving you with 2 nocturnal dance partners that you didn't ask for. But there's one other player on this field, and that's iron. the unsung hero of dopamine production. Your brain needs iron to make dopamine, which I did not know, actually. But with RLS, even if your overall iron levels look fine, your brain supply might be low. And that's because iron transport into the brain from the blood is a completely separate process, and something is interfering with it. Less iron means poor dopamine function. So long story short, RLS is like your brain's dopamine system having bad timing, bad communication, and bad resource management, all conspiring to ruin your sleep. Next are genetic factors. Basically blame your ancestors. All right, so if you have RLS, there's a good chance you could have inherited it as well, like a really annoying family heirloom. About 60% of cases run in families, so if your parents or grandparents had jittery legs, you might too. And there are a few genetic culprits in this twitchy family tree. BTBD9 is a gene variant that increases RLS risk by 50% and messes with iron regulation. It's kind of like a bad warehouse manager at Home Depot who forgets to stock the shelves with salt before a winter storm. There's also MEIS1, which plays a role in early brain development and iron balance. A lot of iron. So if it's faulty, your dopamine system might be set up for failure from the start. And then we come to MAP2K5, SKOR1, and PTPRD. This is exactly why I did not go into genetic research, by the way. These genes are also linked to RLS, but their exact role isn't understood. So, if RLS runs in your family, your genes might be stacking the deck against you without you even knowing it. Now, could you have genetic testing? I guess, but I don't know, that seems kind of just overkill to me. It really depends. If you are severely debilitated by this and you've exhausted all other avenues of finding out what it is, then yeah, you might do genetic testing. But even if it comes back positive, it's really not going to change the treatment course, which is kind of why I'm like, metabolic and systemic causes, when your other systems invite RLS to the party on your behalf. So there are a few other things that can be linked with restless leg syndrome. One is end-stage renal disease, and it's strongly associated with RLS development. So when your kidneys quit filtering, all of those troublemaking toxins that are normally filtered out remain. Pregnancy is here too, and RLS affects up to 26% of pregnant women, particularly in the third trimester, potentially related to iron and folate deficiencies. Super. And this is rough. I had this during all 3 of my pregnancies, and it was miserable. Your body is basically a construction zone, and you're swollen, and you have indigestion 24/90, and now you can't sleep. Diabetes leading to peripheral neuropathy may also contribute to RLS-like symptoms. And then finally, there's rheumatoid arthritis, because the inflammatory cascade that goes on here might also influence dopamine regulation. So how can you tell if you have RLS, and is it serious if you do? The diagnosis of restless leg syndrome is primarily based on the presence of characteristic symptoms, and according to the International Restless Leg Syndrome Study Group, these are the essential 5 signs that tip the scales towards confirmation. The first is an urge to move your legs, usually accompanied by really uncomfortable sensations like electricity, crawling, twitching, itching, throbbing, and creeping. Number 2 are symptoms that begin and worsen during periods of rest or inactivity. 3 is symptoms are partially or totally relieved by movement. 4, they're worse at night. And 5, they cannot be solely accounted for by another medical or behavioral condition. Okay, if you're saying, well, I have all those symptoms, but what testing will show me in black and white that I have this? The answer is no. There's no testing.
None?
There's no specific testing or imaging study that we can do diagnostically to confirm RLS. However, we'll typically conduct testing to rule out other conditions with similar symptoms. So we can identify the potential underlying causes, but it's not a slam dunk. And some of the tests that may be ordered include iron studies like serum ferritin, iron, total iron binding capacity, and transferrin saturation, because again, low iron is strongly associated with it. Complete blood count to check for anemia, kidney function studies, blood glucose to rule out diabetes, vitamin B12 and folate levels because deficiencies can cause neurological symptoms, and magnesium levels because some studies suggest a connection. Specialized testing may also be done, and this will include polysomnography, also known as a sleep study, which isn't routinely needed for diagnosis, but it may be used if sleep apnea is suspected. And then there's also something called the suggested immobilization test. And here you sit for a period of time while your legs are hooked up to sensors to monitor movement. Periodic limb movement monitoring, and don't get this confused with the sit test. They're two different things. They probably are both very expensive, but they're two different things. This one is also done during a sleep study to detect involuntary leg movements during sleep. And this is interesting because about 80% of people with RLS are also prone to having this increased leg activity, even if you do manage to fall asleep and aren't aware of it. A complete neurological exam also helps to rule out other conditions that might cause similar sensations. Now, there are a lot of diagnostic challenges with this because symptoms are subjective and they vary widely between people. There might be an overlap with other conditions like neuropathy, arthritis, or even vascular problems. And some medications can also cause or worsen RLS. Antihistamines like Benadryl, antidepressants, especially those that affect serotonin like SSRIs, such as fluoxetine and tricyclic antidepressants, antipsychotics like Haldol and risperidone, blood pressure meds like calcium channel blockers and beta blockers, and then lithium, which is used to treat bipolar disorder. So once it's diagnosed, severity is often assessed using validated questionnaires like the International Restless Leg Syndrome Rating Scale, or the IRLS, and the Johns Hopkins Restless Legs Severity Scale. These are just killing, they're tongue twisters. Anyway, these both help to determine appropriate treatment approaches and monitor responses to therapy, and I will put the Johns Hopkins scale in the description for those that want to take it. Okay, so let's talk treatment and relief. What can you do about this condition yourself? And first on this list are lifestyle changes. Regular exercise, especially moderate aerobic activity, can naturally boost dopamine production and regulation. And I'm sure you've noticed this exercise high. I've noticed it myself. It's that calm, relaxed feeling after a 30-minute walk. And it's not just psychological, it's neurochemical. But there's also circulatory benefits. RLS symptoms often intensify when blood flow to the legs is compromised. Aerobic exercise improves peripheral circulation, delivering more oxygen and nutrients to the muscles while removing metabolic waste. And this improved blood flow can significantly reduce that uncomfortable need to move sensation. And the endorphin release from exercise also acts as a natural pain reliever and mood enhancer, which can help mask or reduce the uncomfortable sensations of RLS, especially when exercising earlier in the day rather than at night before bed. There's also evidence suggesting exercise improves sleep quality overall. So anything that improves sleep indirectly helps manage symptoms. But also, intensity matters. In my experience and from what research shows, moderate exercise is key. Too intense workouts can actually trigger RLS for some people, while too light doesn't provide enough stimulus. So that sweet spot is moderate aerobic activity. Brisk walking, swimming, cycling, all of that consistently delivers the best results. Reducing caffeine, alcohol, and nicotine intake is key as well. Caffeine is a stimulant, we all know that, and it increases alertness by blocking adenosine receptors. And this leads to increased nerve activity and it makes it harder to relax. Normally, adenosine is what's called an inhibitory neurotransmitter, which promotes sleep and suppresses wakefulness. So you can see that blocking this has the opposite effect. And This is actually how coffee works. Many believe it gives you energy, but not technically. It really blocks these receptors, which tell you you're tired. I hate to burst your bubble, but yeah, no. Coffee doesn't have any magic ability to give you energy. It just stops your body from registering that you're exhausted. Nicotine is also a stimulant that affects dopamine production. Do I need to talk about dopamine anymore? I think you've got it all by now. And finally, alcohol. While it can initially make you feel relaxed, alcohol disrupts sleep quality and can interfere with the dopamine system. Again, it also causes dehydration, which further aggravates these symptoms. I mean, air can aggravate these symptoms, quite frankly. All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. Home remedies and hacks that help with these symptoms. All right, so a few of these hacks were indispensable to me. I'll point out the ones that really just blew my mind with how well they work. At the time, I was desperate. I mean, I was as close to desperate as I think I've ever become when I had this. And one of the things that greatly helped me at the time, might sound weird, but just stick with me, is walking on a cold floor with bare feet. So a few fascinating mechanisms are likely at play with this. The cold sensation creates what neurologists call sensory gating. Essentially, the cold stimulus overrides the uncomfortable electricity sensations that you've got going on. It's like your brain can't process so many sensory inputs at once. And the cold floor takes priority over the crawling and tingling feeling. The temperature change also triggers vasoconstriction, which temporarily alters blood flow patterns in the legs and feet. This physiologic response seems to interrupt the RLS circuit momentarily. There's also an interesting connection between temperature and dopamine activity. Cold exposure can influence how dopamine functions in your nervous system in general. But this also relates to distraction techniques, and most people discover these on their own. The cold floor method combines both sensory distraction and physiologic changes, creating this perfect storm of relief for many people. I've found that alternating between the cold floor and then warming up with like a heating blanket afterwards or something like that, this creates the contrast that seems to especially be effective. You're basically retraining your nervous system through these temperature shifts. Now, doing all of this when you're exhausted, it wasn't high on my list, but I was determined to get relief, and these hacks were suggested to me by one of the best neurologists that I worked with at the time. So if you don't want to try the cold floor pacing, you can just try alternating between warm and cold packs. And fun fact, I also use this to treat peripheral neuropathy. This same method helps to reduce those symptoms as well. And if you want to watch that video, it's this one right here. Leg massages and foam rolling helps to improve circulation and relax your muscles. That's kind of an easy one. Compression socks also help with the circulation and discomfort. Stretching before bed is huge, another big one, because it helps reduce muscle tightness and those restless sensations. And then finally, we come to magnesium supplements or Epsom salts baths. When I was desperately searching for ways to treat this, Epsom salts baths were one of the most effective, and there's some solid science behind why this helps. The magnesium absorption piece is particularly interesting. So when you soak in an Epsom salts bath, which is magnesium sulfate, your skin actually absorbs some of it. Anyone who's a fan of mud baths or has soaked in the Dead Sea knows this. The warm water opens your pores and creates this perfect environment for the magnesium to be absorbed transdermally. But here's what happens next. Magnesium acts as a natural muscle relaxant by regulating calcium uptake and helping release tension. It also supports proper nerve function and transmission, and it can help regulate dopamine production. The warmth of the bath itself improves circulation. My personal experience tracking this, I noticed that 20-minute soaks about 1 to 2 hours before bed seemed to work better than the shorter dips or baths taken at night before sleep. The timing does matter, I did find. It's like your body needs that processing window to fully utilize the magnesium. But this approach differs person to person. Some folks with RLS report immediate relief that lasts throughout the night, while others, like me, found it's more effective as part of a broader magnesium strategy that also included dietary changes and supplements as well. Something also worth noting about the bath, temperature also matters. Too hot and you might actually trigger more symptoms, which we don't want. I found that comfortably warm, not hot, water created that sweet spot where muscles relax without stimulating any weird neurological responses. Castor oil application is also worth a try. So at the time, I didn't know about castor oil, so this wasn't part of my original regimen. But since then, I don't miss a night because it's had profound effects on my peripheral neuropathy and sleep quality. My best guess as to why this helps is that it contains ricinoleic acid, which has anti-inflammatory effects, and RLS can be linked to inflammation and nerve irritation. So reducing that could help calm the discomfort. It also helps to improve blood flow because you're massaging it into your legs. I tend to look at castor oil like your grandma looked at masking tape and WD-40. It treats everything so far. Now, if you see a doctor for this, you can expect to have the lab work that we discussed earlier, and that'll include iron levels, so correcting this if it's off is also key. So yeah, eat foods with iron, basically. The tuna, shellfish, clams, oysters, mussels. And if all else fails and the RLS is significantly disrupting your sleep and life, meaning it's occurring frequently, at least 2 to 3 times per week, and none of the natural remedies have worked well, or it's causing real mental distress, then you'll likely be prescribed medication. And these might include dopamine agonists such as Mirapex and Requip, which help regulate dopamine levels, gabapentin or pregabalin for nerve-related pain and discomfort, and muscle relaxants and sedatives such as benzodiazepines like clonazepam, which will help promote sleep, but each of these has their own drawbacks. Mirapex and Requip can cause drowsiness and daytime fatigue, nausea, constipation, and loss of appetite, dizziness, low blood pressure, and peripheral edema. Even more concerning is they can also lead to poor impulse control, gambling, shopping, binge eating, and hypersexuality. So you'll be closely monitored while on them. True story, I had a patient that, while on one of these meds, purchased 2 industrial-grade bubble machines for her kid's upcoming birthday party and a Disney cruise package to the tune of $10,000, all between midnight and 6 a.m. Like, it's funny, but it's not. It's not. Anyway, gabapentin can cause coordination issues, weight gain, and mood changes, to name a few. And benzos can cause, well, addiction and seizure activity if stopped abruptly. Aside from all of the mainstream remedies that I've mentioned, there are a few that aren't well known and are said to be effective. 2 of them I can personally attest to, which are TENS units and grounding. TENS units are devices that vibrate and interrupt nerve signaling and greatly helped my symptoms at the time. More recently, people are also using vibration plates for the same reasons. So let me know in the comments if you've tried any of these and if they help. Grounding is basically walking barefoot on the grass or beach, and there's really fascinating research for this. The thinking here is nowadays we all wear shoes, rubber, soles, etc., that don't allow us to connect with the Earth's energy as it did when we were more primitive and walked around barefoot. The Earth's surface carries a negative charge, and when you make direct skin contact, your body absorbs free electrons, and these have been shown to neutralize oxidative stress, lower inflammation, and regulate electrical activity in the nerves and muscles. Some studies also suggest that grounding may also improve sleep quality and reduce cortisol, both of which are really important for managing this condition. Acupressure and reflexology have also been shown to help some people, as has low-dose naltrexone, which is an opioid antagonist and is believed to modulate the immune system, reduce inflammation, and help regulate nervous system activity. And it's being explored more and more for chronic pain and autoimmune conditions like fibromyalgia. And then lastly are quinine alternatives, so tonic water but without the quinine. Quinine was used for leg cramps back in the day, like the 1960s through the 90s or so. But it's now restricted because it was found to cause irregular heartbeats, severe bleeding, and life-threatening allergic reactions. So it's banned in the US. However, some people find relief with bitters, apple cider vinegar, or pickle juice, which have similar effects on nerve signals. It makes sense because it was also the active ingredient in a cardiac drug called quinidine, which we used to treat AFib and VTAC. So living with restless leg syndrome isn't just about managing symptoms. It's about understanding the intricate connection between our nervous system and overall wellness. Over the years, I've religiously used 10 targeted movements that have been absolute lifesavers in managing my neuropathy. In fact, the techniques that I'll share in this next video have been my secret weapon in improving my own nerve sensitivity. And I demonstrate them all here. Okay, so what analogies can I give to get the point across about what restless leg syndrome feels like? My brain's in sleep mode, but my legs are buffering forever. I'm ready to sleep, but my legs are ready to run a marathon that they didn't train for. Body says Netflix and chill. Legs say rave and Ibiza. The rest of me says good night. Legs, we ride at dawn.